Hello, my name is John Malloy, Director of the Center for Public Ethics at Martin Luther University College, based in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. Welcome to The Moment, where we explore the choices we make together in support of the common good. You're listening to our special series entitled Beyond Culture Wars, Fostering Solidarity in an Age of Polarization. This series looks at our upcoming 2024 conference to be held at Luther in Waterloo from April 18th to the 20th, exploring a more positive role for religion in countering our current culture wars mentality. Today we are in conversation with Cedric Martin, Artistic Director of Theatre of the Beat, a traveling theatre troupe who will be closing our conference with a production on Saturday afternoon. Welcome to The Moment, Cedric.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be in this moment with you.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here, and it's wonderful to have you at the conference as our closing session on the Saturday afternoon. And before we get into the work that you'll be doing there, maybe you just want to tell us a little bit about Theatre of the Beat and your role as Artistic Director.
Sure. Yeah, so Theatre of the Beat is a traveling theatre troupe, as you said. We have been around since 2011, and we produce social justice theatre plays. We've toured across Canada, toured across the United States, performed in the Netherlands. So in our 13-year history, we've performed over 15 original plays on a range of different topics. So we've talked on conscientious objections. We've talked about peace in times of war. We've looked at LGBTQ inclusion in the church. We've looked at the rise of domestic violence during the pandemic. We've looked at intimate partner violence, elder abuse, healthy masculinity, all ranging of topics and styles of theater that we've produced over the years. In addition to those social justice theater plays we produce, we also have educational workshops that we create and take those into various different settings. So we take our workshops into schools or perhaps into some long-term care homes, libraries, community centers. We might take our workshops into different workplaces and be used as training modules and trying to activate some of the learnings that staff might need to go through, things like that. So we've created a lot of different kinds of educational, social justice-based work. In addition to that work, pre-pandemic and looking to start up again soon is our work out of Grand Valley Institute for Women, the Women's Federal Prison in Kitchener-Waterloo. We've been running a weekly drama program there before the pandemic, and we're hoping to again restart that again soon. Now they're just starting to get programming back at the federal prison there. So that's in a nutshell some of the work we do.
And obviously a huge range. And in talking before, knowing a little bit about Theatre of the Beat, it's not simply a play, though I understand it can be a scripted play that's been rehearsed with actors, that you have other formats. So what are some of the formats, and what's the format that delegates are going to be experiencing at the conference at Luther?
Yeah, so we do use a different range of styles to present our material. Something we find important when you're raising such heavy or challenging topics is to have dialogue with our audience. So if it's a straight play or a musical or something, we'd always have a talk back. We call it our talk back second act after the performance, an opportunity for the audience to ask questions of our actors. So that's one way that we interact with our audience. But we also use a style of theater called forum theater. And that's the style we're going to be utilizing at this upcoming conference at Luther. And how forum theater works is audience members have an opportunity to watch a play, a short scene through once. And this short scene is going to intentionally end poorly for these characters on stage. It's meant to give our audience a feeling of unease or wishing things had maybe gone differently for some of the characters that they're seeing up on stage. And then a facilitator is going to come out and they're going to talk about what we just saw on stage and say, are we happy with that result? And audience members in real time are going to have an opportunity to raise their hand and to offer suggestions and to talk about the things that they were seeing in that scene. And then the facilitator is going to say, okay, we're going to start that scene again. And this time, as you're watching through the scene, just raise your hand, yell stop whenever you see something on stage that's bothering you, something that you wish had gone differently. And these actors are going to freeze in real time. And then we'll talk about what you're seeing, see if anyone else has any other thoughts about that particular moment. We'll offer a suggestion to these actors, and we'll see what changes as a result of those suggestions, those offers, see if we can come up with a better or different outcome for the characters in those scenes. This style of theater is not one that we take credit for creating. Forum theater has been around for several decades now. It was created by a Brazilian theater practitioner named Augusto Boal, who made this into a very popular theater style today, and especially within social movement, social justice type theater. What was really interesting to me in his life story of how he developed this is he first created it and used it within the theater context, but later he became a politician in Brazil, and he actually used this as a politician. He hired actors to be on his staff, and in town squares or in community centers, they would present these scenes based on political issues that were happening at the day, and people would make suggestions and make offers and try to change things and see what would come out as a result, and use that as a tool for making policy, making changes. So it has very practical uses outside of just the intellectual style. So I think it's really neat that we're able to bring this to a conference like this and kind of bookend it by or just end it by having this sort of theater performance to make real some of the things that we've been talking about over the 3 days.
Well, my reaction is twofold. It's funny because on the one hand, this forum format seems ideal for dealing with polarization, in the sense that people are in the audience are going to have different viewpoints, and this is going to allow them to maybe talk things through. But my second reaction is, in terms of the conference itself, polarization as an issue is different than if we were talking about, I know you've done work in this, for example, intimate partner violence or, a social justice issue, poverty, that sort of thing. It's a little bit amorphous. So how are you going to get around this idea of just talking about, as we're sometimes calling it, a conversation about a conversation? How are you going to get around the idea of us sort of interacting or engaging a little bit better in this forum style? I guess we've got to wait till Saturday afternoon to see for sure. But what are some of your initial thoughts?
Yeah. So what we're trying to do with this is, rather than assume what people want to hear at this conference, is we're working with the other speakers at this conference, the other workshop leaders. We've reached out to them by email and asking if they have any ideas for scenes, any ideas about ways to activate some of the things they're talking about in their talks and in their workshops. So we'd have some scene suggestions from these actual speakers. We'll also probably be utilizing your podcast, John, to listen to some of their other talks to hear if there's ways that we can integrate some of that into our scene work. So we're going to be coming prepared with some scenes related to the other things that people will be learning at this conference. And then at the actual session that we're leading itself, we're going to be really listening to our audience. We never try to pre-plan exactly how it's going to go. We're trying to be true to the forum theater style. And so if there are two different audience members that have opposite views on a particular topic that we're discussing, I think that's going to be great. We can have two different versions of the scene play out, and we'll see two very different endings likely as a result of these changes. So maybe one version, someone says, well, maybe just listen to that other person for longer, or the other person's going to say, well, no, cut them off, and you're going to have to explain why earlier, and things like that. And maybe one version will blow up in one of the characters' faces, and then another one, they end up going for coffee or something, right? Like we won't know until that's the beauty of improv, right? That you get to see that, and each moment is unique, and we try to be as authentic and true to life as we can be.
And tell me about your experience with polarization with some of the other shows you've done and groups that you've engaged with. I guess maybe start at the beginning. How do you define polarization? And I know you've looked at some very sensitive issues. how do you take into account the fact that there are thoughtful people that can have views that are very different, and there are extremes that are out there. How do we navigate this? What's been your experience with your work thus far, and what do you anticipate at the conference itself?
Yeah, I mean, people have beliefs, and that's, I think the people that are coming to this conference are all going to have one belief or another, and I think that's good. And it's about how we relate to each other, I guess, really is what it comes down to, and how we treat each other, and how we engage in dialogue. And so if people are willing to come to the table and have open and honest dialogue, then we're able to, create great theater and great art together, and have great conversation together, especially in this forum theater format. If a belief ever gets in the way, that is either, people will draw their own lines in the sand. What are negotiables and what are the non-negotiables? And I think there are many examples of what might be a non-negotiable for you in your life. And there are things that maybe you haven't thought enough about, and you don't know if it's a negotiable because you haven't even considered what someone else might think on this particular topic. So I think, there's the hope that we can negotiate on some of these negotiables, and we can help understand each other on the non-negotiables, and why they might be non-negotiables. And if there's room to turn a non-negotiable into negotiable, I don't know. I think that's something that we have to explore when we're creating our art. We never assume that we're the experts on a particular topic. We always try to partner with people that are doing the everyday work that we just talk about in our plays, because we acknowledge that, we set up as a touring company, we set up shop, we perform, and we might leave the next day. So how would we know what's specifically affecting one community over another? How would we know what intimate partner violence looks like in small town Saskatchewan versus, Vancouver, right? Like the goal is that we partner with these agencies that are doing this work, but we also listen to the everyday individuals that are affected by the stories that we talk about. So the last series of plays we were touring was part of a collection called I Love You and It Hurts. And we looked at 3 different short plays in that series. We looked at elder abuse, we looked at intimate partner violence in youth relationships, and we looked at healthy masculinity. So we had 3 different playwrights that were each writing a short play, and each of those playwrights had opportunities to have workshops with everyday people, and they had opportunities to interview experts in these fields. So we partnered, for example, with Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. We partnered with Assaulted Women's Helpline of Ontario. We partnered with Mennonite Men. We partnered with different agencies as we were on the road, because we toured this play from Ontario out to British Columbia and every province in between. And as we were making each of the stops along the way, we had local agencies provide a crisis worker or a social worker at each of these performances to add that authenticity and provide local resources at each of these shows. I don't know if I answered the root of your question there about how do I define polarization, but that's where my mind starts to go to is.
Because I'm interested when you talked about the non-negotiables. And although something, obviously as serious as intimate partner violence, I suspect that your play looks, delves very deeply into it, and there may be an opportunity to have, I'm suspecting, an understanding of where all the actors are coming from. At the end of the day, intimate partner violence is a non-negotiable. It's bad. No one's going to ever defend it. We need to work to eradicate it. But there's lots of issues out there that are certainly going to either come up directly at the conference, or we're going to talking about them, where the non-negotiables are sort of divided down the middle. Some of we're talking about culture wars, and you talk about an issue like abortion, where there are individuals who it's the hill they will die on. They are 100% committed to their side, and they have absolutely no use for anyone who has a different view. You think about issues around LGBTQ, the place of the LGBTQ community in our society. And again, you run into that where there are those that will say this is non-negotiable and this is the hill we will die on. So how has your work dealt with that? Have they dealt with issues that are, where they're literally sides? You go over to the right side if you believe this, you go over to the left side or the back of the room if you believe that. I mean, have you dealt with those issues? And do you look at how the sort of non-negotiables can live together in a way where they're not simply hating each other or thinking the other side is a group of either evil people or stupid people?
Yeah, so we've presented some controversial in various settings work, and to some our work is not very controversial and they hardly very firmly agree with it, and to some it's very controversial and we've had people walk out in the middle of our plays. We've had groups that have asked us to change the text because they saw a version of the script and they asked us to cut scenes in order for us to present it in those contexts. And so that was a non-negotiable for us, is that we weren't willing to cut scenes from our text in order to present to those audience members. So here's maybe an approach that I'll take into answering this question. One of our last plays, so the one before I Love You and It Hurts, was a show called Selah's Song, which was a family-friendly musical about peace. And we toured this show in 2022. And so very much acutely aware on our minds was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the war that was happening there. And the stories didn't directly parallel everything that was happening there, but there was some similarities that were happening in the story. In our fictional play that we were presenting, there's this young girl that starts writing this song about peace and is standing up for, wanting to see the other side come together. And there was, neighbors and cousins that are on opposite sides of this war and wanting to bring people back together. And as a result of this song, the king of this land puts a song ban out so that no one can sing any song at all. And there's a literal song ban that's happening in Iran right now. Right? Like there's real world parallels that were happening to this small scale show that we were dealing with. And so I think, there's, this is again, me going down this tangent and not answering the root of your question here, John, I'm sorry about that. But I think in our plays, we try to also show that there are these opposite sides. And I think what you were starting to respond to earlier, talking about how the audience might relate to some of the characters we see on stage. In the piece that we developed on intimate partner violence in youth relationships, what makes it so hard as an audience member is that you feel for the character that is the abuser. You see that he's going through some of his own mental health crises. He's feeling suicidal at points. There are these real challenges that he's going through, and at the same time, it doesn't excuse the behavior that you see him do, or even alludes to what is happening behind the scenes. And so you're right that there are other things that might, layer on that make someone behave a certain way. And I think understanding the other things that get to someone's ideal about abortion, about LGBTQ inclusion might be, there's several layers deep of why they came to that conclusion, and that's that hill that they want to die on. But this is the final thing that they feel that they have to defend, because otherwise the next stage and the stage before that all starts to fall apart and starts to crumble. And that's what they've built their worldview on, is all those different things leading up to that point.
And is that part of your role you see in these plays to try to explore that, to show the different layers and how people are coming forward? And it sounds like you have some spoilers that you, not spoilers in the sense of giving away the ending, but a wonderful, straightforward story where this group is the good folks and this group is the bad folks, and that you mix it up and have real human beings that are complicated and broken, and we can start to see it. And so, do you see that as part of your mandate, and do you try to deal with some of these sensitive issues by showing that the world isn't full of people with the right opinions and people with the wrong opinions, depending on your perspective?
Yeah, I would say that that's true. I think in terms of the arts world, especially in the forum theater world, the social justice world that we identify as and sort of live in, I think there are some very arts purists that might think the way we present forum theater is not right, not proper, in that sometimes our characters are quite nuanced. In the traditional sense of forum theater, there was a bit more clear cut. This is the perpetrator, this is the bystander, and this is the victim. And in our versions of events, we do try to make people real. We do try to have those layers of nuance and understanding that there is, more to a person than just being an abuser, than just being a victim. And there are, multiple approaches that we can find in supporting a situation. Yes, of course, we need to support victims, but we also might need to support the abuser. And if we stop the abusers, then we might not need as many of the crisis centers and the shelter beds and the thing, right? Like, there are the different avenues to approach for any given situation.
Because I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think one of the problems that we have as a society is it's the death of nuance. We label people. I mean, it's interesting, all the different definitions of polarization that exist out there. The most common one is we have a society where people are picking extreme positions and there's miles and miles between them. But there are other definitions, and one of them is not that the differences of opinion are that huge, but the simple fact that everyone is just turning inwards. They're finding people that they agree with and no one else, and they're just dismissing everyone else. Everyone else falls into the categories I talked about earlier, either being unenlightened, stupid, or bad people. And there is no recognition that they might have something to bring to the conversation. There's no recognition that they are probably at their core as broken and confused and feeling a little helpless as the rest of us. I mean, there's none of that. It's let's divide the world and let's make sure that we either dislike the other, or we do dislike the other side, and let's make sure that we either educate them or we silence them somehow. And I guess in a broader way, do you see the arts, the work that you do, arts in general, as being able to make a contribution to dealing with this problem? Because it's kind of frightening. I teach a course called Politics and Faith in an Age of Anger. And the joke is that I'm going to have to stop teaching it when we're no longer angry. And of course, the comeback is, so I'm going to be, in my job for a long, long time because we're angry, we're frustrated, we're divided. So where do you think the arts fit into trying to address this?
Yeah, I think you're right that there is a lot of othering, and that it feels a lot easier to cast judgment once you've labeled someone as something. And that can, I'm sure you talk a lot about that in politics in your course. Once you've labeled someone as the other party that I don't support, then it feels easier to cast these additional secondary judgments on this person and forget that their name might be John and that they have, all these nuances behind them. Where do I see the arts in that? We see ourselves as, a grassroots level organization. We're not, presenting films that millions of people are watching. We're doing theater for rooms of 150 people. We're doing theater for a workshop group of 20 people. We're doing a prison theater drama weekly workshop for 10 to 15 participants, right? Like we see it as very grassroots, individual level work. And we do want to get to know the people that we work with. When we tour, we have a very different model of touring than other theater companies. When we're on the road, we generally don't stay in hotels. We generally stay with people from the communities that we're performing for, which is incredibly generous of them to open their homes to us. But we also break bread with the people that we're performing for. We get to know the community that we're performing these shows in, so that it's not just a show that we set up shop and then we leave the next day and then there's no follow-up, no further communications. And maybe that helps as an entry point too of making it harder for people that might really disagree with the content of a particular show that we are presenting. It might make it a lot harder for them to be so angry at us if they sat down for a meal with us beforehand and then we present a topic about LGBTQ inclusion in the church and they're thinking about it more afterwards. Well, I really like that, Cedric. It was nice of him and he helped me with the dishes afterwards and I had a good conversation with him. Well, maybe I have to think a bit more about that conversation and it's not as cut and dry as I thought going into this evening or something, right? So that's the way that we try to make change, and it's slow and it's conversational and it's getting to know each other, and that helps, I think, with avoiding those labeling and those othering and dividing, is to remind each other that the world can be a lot smaller than we realize, and to put individuals into those stories.
Well, it sounds very, very exciting. You're going to be the closing session, and you said though that are you going to be there to monitor things and to get some ideas? I know you're getting feedback from the organizers, but are you going to be on the ground over the course of the 2 days and starting on Thursday night?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to make myself available for conversation, especially afterwards. On the Saturday itself, we will be setting up during the morning, so I'm not going to be as available Saturday morning. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be wanting to connect with people after the performance and having some of those conversations. So there's going to be 3, maybe 4 of us at this conference, depending if we have another support person. But we'll be very excited to continue some of these conversations that start on Saturday after some of these performances. And we're just excited about, what conversations get started by some of these scenes. We have, a few scene ideas already, but we're excited about what more are going to come from some of these workshop leaders and speakers over email in the coming days. And then we'll be preparing throughout next week in anticipation of the conference. So yeah, we're really looking forward to the conference and the dialogue and connecting with people there.
Well, it sounds very, very exciting. And I think the most important thing is your commitment to helping people continue the conversation, because the goal of a conference like this has to be preparing people, giving people the tools and the ideas and the time to reflect so that they can take it out to the broader world and back to their own community. Because if we just leave it at Luther over those 2 days in an evening, we're not going to accomplish very much. So we're very, very excited you're coming. We're delighted that you'll be closing the conference. And thank you very much for being a part of this. For those listening who haven't registered yet, there's still time. The conference is from April 18th. It begins in the evening until the afternoon of the 20th. And if you're interested in registering, you can visit Luther's website, luther.wlu.ca, and under the Spotlight section, there is some basic information on the conference, which if you click on, will give you the full conference agenda, including some information about the Theater of the Beats performance on the Saturday afternoon, and ways that you can register for the conference. And as I say, it's not too late. We look forward to seeing you there. So, Cedric, thank you very, very much for joining us here today, for joining the moment. We're looking forward to seeing the theater production on Saturday afternoon and continuing the conversation. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your time.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of The Moment, a production of the Center for Public Ethics at Martin Luther University College, the founding institution of Wilfrid Laurier University, located in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. Visit our website, luther.wlu.ca, for resources and more information on other podcasts. The technical producer of today's recording was Christopher Macheline, with support from Alex Kinsella. Creative Commons music was provided by Jason Shaw on audionautics.com. Thanks for joining us.